Power is not loud. It is not desperate. It is not chasing, begging, explaining, or proving. Power is calm. Power is controlled. Power is detached. You are. Detachment is the final form of power because it is the moment you no longer need the outcome. And the moment you no longer need the outcome, you become dangerous. You are. In the best possible way, you become centered, you become immovable, you become focused. Most people misunderstand detachment. They think it means you don't care. You are. That is weakness disguised as strength. Real detachment means you care deeply, but you are not controlled by what you care about. You feel, you are, but you are not ruled by feeling. You desire, but you are not enslaved by desire. There is a profound psychological shift that happens when a person stops clinging. You are. When you stop chasing validation, approval, love, applause, or reassurance, something extraordinary occurs. Your nervous system calms. Your decisions sharpen. You are. Your posture changes. Your words carry weight. You stop reacting. You start choosing. And choice is power. The desperate person reacts. The detached person responds. You are. The desperate person negotiates their worth. The detached person embodies it. The desperate person fears loss. You are. The detached person understands that nothing external defines them. This is not about becoming cold. It is about becoming sovereign. You are. If someone pulls away and you panic, you have handed them your power. If someone criticizes you and you crumble, you have outsourced your stability. You are. If someone ignores you and you obsess, you have surrendered your focus. Detachment takes that power back. It says, I remain grounded regardless of what you do. You are. That is strength. Emotional control is a higher form of dominance than emotional expression. Anyone can explode. Anyone can cry. Anyone can chase. You are. But it takes discipline to stand still when your emotions demand movement. It takes maturity to remain composed when your ego screams for reaction. You are. Detachment is not passive. It is active restraint. You must train yourself to pause. When the urge to text appears, pause. When the need to defend yourself arises, you are. Pause. When the desire to prove your worth surfaces, pause. In that pause lives your authority. In that silence lives your command. You are. The person who can sit with discomfort without scrambling to escape it becomes unshakable. Understand this clearly. Attachment breeds anxiety. You are. Anxiety breeds poor decisions. Poor decisions destroy power. Detachment eliminates that chain at its root. When you are detached, you are free to evaluate reality instead of distorting it through fear. You see clearly. You assess behavior accurately. You do not romanticize red flags. You do not justify disrespect. You do not beg for crumbs. You simply observe and then you act with precision. You are. There is something magnetic about a person who is not grasping. They do not rush. They do not over-explain. They do not overgive. They move deliberately. You are. They speak intentionally. They withdraw when necessary without drama. And here is the paradox. The less you cling, the more people respect you. The less you chase, you are. The more you are pursued, the less you need, the more you are valued. Why? Because detachment signals self-sufficiency. You are. It communicates that your identity is not dependent on someone else's behavior, and nothing is more powerful than a person who stands complete within themselves. You are. Focus must replace fixation. Fixation drains energy. Focus directs it. Fixation obsesses over outcomes. Focus improves character. Fixation asks, you are. Focus asks, am I becoming stronger? Fixation weakens posture. Focus strengthens presence. Your task is not to control others. You are. Your task is to control yourself. That means building routines, building competence, building discipline, building standards that cost you something to maintain. You are. When your life is structured around growth, you do not have time to chase uncertainty. You are too busy sharpening yourself. Detachment also protects your dignity. You are. Dignity is silent. It does not plead. It does not perform. It does not beg to be understood. It stands firm. If someone cannot see your value, you are. Detachment allows you to walk away without resentment. If someone tests your boundaries, detachment allows you to enforce them without emotion. If someone leaves, you are. Detachment allows you to accept it without collapsing, because your foundation is internal. You must understand your power built on external validation will always be fragile. Power built on internal stability becomes immovable. So train your mind, strengthen your body. You are. Organize your environment, speak precisely, act deliberately, remove chaos, eliminate impulsiveness, refuse to be provoked. When you master your reactions, you are. You master your direction. Detachment is the refusal to let temporary emotions dictate permanent decisions. You are. It is the discipline to prioritize long-term respect over short-term relief. It is the awareness that chasing destroys attraction, but composure builds it. You are. This is not theory. It is structure. It is psychological hierarchy. It is self-governance. And self-governance is the highest form of power. You are. You do not win by overpowering others. You win by mastering yourself. You do not dominate by shouting. You dominate by standing unmoved. You are. You do not secure respect by demanding it. You secure it by embodying it. Detach from the outcome. Attach to your growth. Detach from approval. Attach to discipline. You are. Detach from fear. Attach to purpose. That is the final form of power. And when you reach it, you will notice something remarkable. You are. You no longer need to convince anyone of your strength. They will feel it. Detachment is disciplined strength, not emotional coldness. You are. It is the ability to stand firm in the storm without becoming the storm. Most people confuse detachment with indifference. They assume that if you are detached, you are. You must not care. That is a shallow interpretation. Emotional coldness is avoidance. It is fear disguised as superiority. You are. It is the refusal to engage because engagement feels risky. Disciplined detachment is the opposite. It is full awareness combined with self-control. You are. It is feeling everything and choosing your response carefully instead of reacting impulsively. Detachment requires strength because it demands restraint. You are. Anyone can lash out when offended. Anyone can chase when ignored. Anyone can cling when afraid. That requires no discipline. You are. But to feel the surge of emotion and still remain composed, that is power. To experience rejection and not beg for reassurance, that is stability. You are. To desire something deeply and still accept the possibility of losing it, that is maturity. Emotional coldness shuts down vulnerability. You are. Disciplined detachment refines it. A detached person can love deeply, work passionately, and commit fully, but they do not lose themselves in the process. You are. They maintain identity, they maintain standards, they maintain boundaries, they refuse to trade self-respect for temporary comfort. When you lack detachment, you become reactive. Reactivity is weakness because it hands control to external forces. Someone criticizes you and your mood collapses. Someone delays responding, and your anxiety spikes. Someone disagrees and you feel threatened. In each of those moments, your emotional state is being dictated by someone else's behavior. You are. That is not strength. That is dependence. Disciplined detachment interrupts that pattern. It inserts a pause between stimulus and response. In that pause, you evaluate. You are. You assess, you decide, you ask yourself, is this worth my energy? Is this aligned with my standards? You are. Is this reaction constructive? The pause is the birthplace of power. Detachment also clarifies perception. When you are emotionally entangled, you distort reality. You are. You excuse poor behavior. You ignore red flags. You overanalyze neutral events. Attachment creates narratives fueled by fear. Detachment strips those narratives away. You are. It forces you to see what is actually happening, not what you hope is happening. Clarity leads to better decisions. Better decisions build confidence. You are. Confidence reinforces strength. There is another layer to this discipline. Detachment protects dignity. When you are not desperate for approval, you speak differently. You are. Your tone changes. Your body language changes. You are not negotiating your worth in every interaction. You are not seeking validation in every conversation. You are. You are present, but you are not pleading. That presence is magnetic. People respect those who respect themselves. You are. And self-respect is demonstrated through emotional control. If you cannot manage your impulses, your words lose weight. If you cannot regulate your reactions, you are. Your authority dissolves. Discipline is what gives your character structure. Understand this clearly. Detachment is not passivity. It is not withdrawal from life. You are. It is active engagement without emotional chaos. You can pursue goals with intensity while remaining unattached to immediate results. You are. You can invest in relationships while remaining secure in your independence. You can strive for excellence without collapsing under failure. You are. The difference lies in identity. When your identity is anchored internally, outcomes enhance you but do not define you. Success becomes a reward, not a necessity. You are. Rejection becomes feedback, not devastation. Loss becomes a lesson, not annihilation. Emotional coldness isolates. Disciplined detachment empowers. Coldness says, you are. I do not care. Detachment says, I care, but I will not lose myself. Coldness avoids vulnerability. Detachment chooses vulnerability wisely. Coldness builds walls. You are. Detachment builds boundaries. Boundaries are a form of order, and order is essential for psychological stability. When you define what you tolerate and what you refuse, you are. You reduce internal conflict. You stop arguing with yourself. You stop compromising your principles for short-term approval. You are. You operate from structure rather than impulse. Structure strengthens character. If someone disrespects you and you calmly walk away, that is detachment. You are. If someone tests your limits and you reinforce them without anger, that is detachment. If someone leaves and you grieve but do not chase, That is detachment. You are. Each of these actions demonstrates internal alignment. You are not suppressing emotion. You are regulating it. Regulation is mastery. You are. To cultivate disciplined detachment, you must train your mind. Observe your emotional triggers. Notice when insecurity pushes you to over-explain. You are. Notice when fear pushes you to cling. Notice when ego pushes you to prove. Awareness is the first step. Control follows awareness. Then practice restraint. Delay impulsive responses. Choose silence when emotion is high. Revisit decisions when calm returns. Over time, this builds resilience. You become less fragile. You are. You become less reactive. You become less dependent on immediate emotional gratification. And that is when strength becomes visible. True power does not shout. You are. It does not chase. Does not collapse, it stands steady, it acts deliberately, it moves with intention. You are. Detachment is disciplined strength because it requires courage to remain centered when everything inside you wants to react. You are. It requires confidence to let go when holding on feels safer. It requires integrity to maintain standards when compromise would bring quick relief. You are. This is not about becoming distant from life. It is about becoming grounded within it. When you master detachment, you stop being controlled by circumstances. You are. You begin shaping them. You feel deeply, but you choose wisely. You engage fully, but you remain steady. You care intensely, but you protect your core. You are. That is not emotional coldness. That is strength refined by discipline. True power begins when you stop needing validation. You are. The moment you no longer depend on applause to move forward is the moment you become unstoppable. You are. Most people live trapped inside invisible cages built from other people's opinions. They measure their worth by compliments. They measure their progress by recognition. You are. They measure their identity by how loudly the world approves of them. And because of that, they remain weak. Not because they lack talent. You are. Not because they lack intelligence, but because their internal stability is outsourced. If your confidence rises and falls based on someone else's response, you are. You are not powerful. You are dependent. Validation is seductive. It feels good. It gives temporary reassurance. It soothes insecurity for a moment. You are. But it is a dangerous foundation for identity. When approval becomes a necessity rather than a bonus, you begin to perform instead of live. You are. You begin to adjust your voice to fit the room. You soften your standards to avoid criticism. You chase acceptance instead of excellence. And in doing so, you shrink. You are. Power does not come from being liked. Power comes from being aligned. When your actions reflect your principles, when your words match your convictions, you are. When your behavior is rooted in discipline rather than approval seeking, that is strength. Needing validation creates hesitation. You second guess decisions. You are. You overthink conversations. You replay interactions in your mind searching for mistakes. You dilute your message so no one feels uncomfortable. But leadership, you are. Real leadership requires the willingness to stand firm even when misunderstood. Consider this carefully. If you require everyone's agreement, you are. You will never accomplish anything significant. Growth invites criticism. Ambition attracts doubt. Change provokes resistance. You are. If your nervous system cannot tolerate disapproval, you will retreat every time you face opposition. And retreat becomes a habit. When you stop needing validation, you are. Something shifts psychologically. Your posture changes. Your tone becomes calmer. You no longer rush to explain yourself. You no longer chase reassurance. You are. You speak clearly, then you let your words stand. You act decisively, then you let the results unfold. That composure commands respect. You are. There is a profound difference between confidence and arrogance. Arrogance demands recognition. Confidence does not require it. Arrogance seeks attention. You are. Confidence seeks progress. Arrogance is loud because it is insecure. Confidence is steady because it is grounded. You are. Validation seeking behavior often disguises itself as humility. You pretend to be unsure so others will reassure you. You are. You downplay your strengths so people will lift you up. You ask for opinions not because you need insight, but because you crave affirmation. You are. That pattern erodes internal authority. Authority begins within. You must develop the capacity to evaluate yourself honestly. You are. To know when you have performed well without needing praise. To admit when you have failed without collapsing under shame. Self-assessment replaces external judgment. You are. That is maturity. If you rely on others to define your value, you will constantly adjust yourself to maintain approval. That adjustment fragments identity. Over time, you are. You forget who you are because you are too busy trying to be acceptable. Power demands integration. You are. It demands that your private self and public self are not in conflict. It demands that your standards remain intact, whether you are praised or criticized. You are. Stopping the need for validation does not mean rejecting feedback. Feedback is useful. Wisdom listens. But there is a difference between learning and begging. You are. You can analyze criticism without internalizing it. You can appreciate compliments without depending on them. Emotional independence is not isolation. It is stability. You are. When someone disapproves of you and you remain composed, that is power. When someone ignores your effort and you continue working, that is power. You are. When someone underestimates you and you respond with discipline instead of defensiveness, that is power. You are no longer controlled by perception. You are. Understand this clearly. The world respects those who respect themselves. If you constantly seek reassurance, people sense uncertainty. If you constantly seek praise, you are. People sense neediness. But when you operate from internal conviction, others respond differently. They may not always agree, but they recognize strength. You are. Strength is attractive because it signals reliability. A person who does not crumble under criticism can be trusted with responsibility. You are. A person who does not inflate under praise can be trusted with success. To reach that level, you must confront discomfort. You are. You must allow silence after you speak without rushing to fill it. You must allow disagreement without trying to convert everyone. You are. You must allow rejection without rewriting your identity. This is psychological endurance. Train yourself to act without announcing. You are. Train yourself to improve without broadcasting. Train yourself to work without seeking applause. Let results speak. Let consistency build reputation. You are. Let discipline replace performance. When validation is no longer your fuel, purpose becomes your fuel. Purpose is internal. It does not fluctuate with opinion. You are. It does not weaken under criticism. It remains steady because it is rooted in values rather than reaction. When you act from purpose, your energy stabilizes. You are. You waste less time proving, you invest more time building. And here is the paradox: the less you seek validation, the more respect you gain. You are. The less you chase approval, the more credibility you develop. The less you perform for attention, the more authentic you become. You are. Authenticity is powerful because it is rare. Most people are adjusting constantly. They are filtering themselves through anticipated reactions. You are. They are shaping their words for maximum acceptance. But the individual who stands grounded, who speaks with clarity and accepts the consequences, moves differently. You are. True power begins when you stop needing validation, because that is when fear loses leverage over you. Fear of rejection weakens. Fear of judgment fades. You are. Fear of being misunderstood diminishes. And in the absence of that fear, you act boldly. You make decisions based on principle, not popularity. You are. You pursue goals based on meaning, not applause. You build character based on discipline, not approval. That is independence. That is strength. That is power. You are. Control your reactions and you control your life. Every moment you spend reacting impulsively is a moment you surrender your power to circumstances outside yourself. You are. True authority begins not with external conquest, but with internal mastery. Most people live at the mercy of their emotions. A single comment, a glance, you are, or a slight delay in response can send them spiraling. Anger flares, anxiety spikes, frustration consumes, and in that chaos, you are. They make decisions that undermine their own progress. Their life becomes a series of reactive loops, dictated by events, people, and environments they cannot control. You are. They mistake the intensity of their response for the depth of their character, yet in reality, they are powerless, enslaved to impulse. You are. When you take control of your reactions, you shift the center of gravity. You are no longer tossed about by the opinions of others or the unpredictable turns of life. You are. Your nervous system stops being a puppet to circumstance. You learn to pause before you act, to observe before you respond. You are. And to choose action that aligns with your long-term purpose rather than momentary emotion. This pause, this deliberate space between stimulus and response, you are, is where real strength resides. Reacting instantly is easy. It requires no discipline. Controlling your response requires courage and clarity. It is simple, you are, yet it is rare. The world rewards the reactive with immediate gratification, applause, or attention, but that reward is fleeting. Real power is cumulative, you are. It grows quietly, steadily, and only in those who master themselves. Emotional regulation is not suppression. It is not pretending you do not feel, you are. It is full awareness and deliberate choice. To control your reaction does not mean you are cold or unfeeling. On the contrary, it means you feel intensely, you are, but you decide intentionally how that feeling will shape your actions. You honor your emotions without letting them dictate the trajectory of your life. You are. That distinction is subtle, yet it separates the weak from the formidable. Every human interaction is a test of internal authority. A sharp word from a colleague, you are an unfair critique, or a moment of rejection, these are not just external events, they are opportunities to exercise mastery. When you remain composed in these moments, you demonstrate that your inner state is invulnerable to temporary disruption. That stability is magnetic. People notice it. They may not articulate it, but they feel it, they respect it, they are drawn to it. The discipline of controlling your reactions begins with self-awareness. Observe the triggers that pull you out of balance. Notice the situations where your instincts push toward overreaction, defensiveness, anger, anxiety, or panic. Identify them. Name them, and then practice restraint. Delay the impulse to speak or act. Take a deep breath, step back mentally, and ask yourself, does reacting this way serve my purpose, or does it serve someone else's agenda? This simple question rewires your decision making over time. When you consistently choose your responses rather than being chosen by them, you reclaim the energy you once wasted on chaos. That energy becomes focus, creativity, and strength. You stop being scattered and start being deliberate. You stop being manipulated and start being sovereign. You stop responding like a leaf in the wind and start moving like a force that bends the environment around it. The benefits of controlled reactions are not immediate. Life will still push. People will still test you. Situations will still frustrate you. But each time you act with composure, you reinforce your internal authority. Each time you respond with clarity instead of impulsivity, you build resilience. Each time you maintain balance under pressure, you cultivate influence. Over time, control over your reactions becomes control over the direction of your life itself. This principle applies to every sphere: personal, professional, and relational. In conflict, those who control their temper dictate the outcome. In ambition, those who control their impatience shape their trajectory. In relationships, those who control their jealousy, insecurity, or neediness create respect and trust. In every arena, the person who masters themselves quietly dominates. Control does not mean rigidity. It is not the absence of flexibility, but the absence of reactionary chaos. It allows you to navigate complexity without losing stability. When a crisis arises, you can think clearly. When criticism lands, you can respond intelligently. When failure comes, you can recover strategically. That calm command is not granted. It is cultivated through intentional practice, reflection, and discipline. To practice controlling your reactions, start small. Notice your response to minor inconveniences, your irritation at being cut off in traffic, the frustration of waiting in line, or the impulse to argue over trivial disagreements. These are training grounds. Master them, and you build muscle for the larger tests life will inevitably present. Control your reactions, and you no longer give power to anger, fear, or impatience. You reclaim it for purpose, patience, and precision. You learn to act, not react, to respond, not to explode. You learn that mastery of self is the cornerstone of every achievement. When your responses are deliberate, your life ceases to be a series of accidents. Your actions, your relationships, and goals begin to align naturally. Decisions are no longer reactive attempts to soothe temporary discomfort. They are intentional steps toward the life you intend to build. Your time, energy, and focus are no longer squandered on chaos. They are invested in growth, progress, an impact. The world is unpredictable. People are inconsistent. Events are uncontrollable. But one thing remains within reach at all times: your response. And mastery of that response is the gateway to mastery of life. Control your reactions, and you step into a realm where you influence outcomes, shape environments, and create opportunities. You no longer exist as a passive participant. You emerge as an architect of your own destiny. This is the essence of power. Not the loudness of your voice, not the volume of your presence, not the attention you command. But the quiet strength of choosing your response when every instinct tells you to react. That is the ultimate discipline. That is the ultimate sovereignty. That is the path to a life that is unshakable, purposeful, and truly yours. Focus is the weapon. Self-mastery is the victory. Everything else, distractions, opinions, failures and chaos, loses its power the moment you wield your attention deliberately. The ability to concentrate, to direct energy toward a purpose without wavering, is the foundation upon which every achievement is built. Without focus, talent withers. Without focus, discipline collapses. Without focus, intention dissolves into noise. Focus is not merely paying attention. It is refusing to allow the external world to dictate your internal state. You are. It is the refusal to scatter your energy across trivialities, social media, gossip, or the endless pull of other people's drama. The mind is the battlefield. You are, and focus is the blade. Every moment you allow your attention to be stolen by the meaningless, you dull that blade. Every moment you regain it, you sharpen it. You are. Most people live fragmented lives. Their attention is divided not by necessity, but by habit. They react to notifications, interruptions. You are. And distractions as if they were mandates. They chase novelty rather than depth. They switch tasks constantly, believing business equates to productivity. You are. But scattered energy is wasted energy. Multitasking is illusionary strength. True power lies in single-minded application. Focus demands choice. You are. It demands prioritization. You must decide what deserves your energy and, just as importantly, what does not. You are. Each note to a distraction is a declaration of sovereignty. Each yes to deliberate action is an investment in power. Focus requires awareness of what pulls at you. You are. What tempts you and what seeks to derail your purpose. Recognize it, resist it, and redirect it intentionally. Self-mastery is the natural companion to focus. You are. You can wield the sharpest weapon, but without control over your impulses, emotions, and habits, it becomes ineffective. You are. Mastery of self means understanding your patterns, knowing your triggers, and governing your behavior with discipline rather than reaction. You are. It means choosing your response even when desire, fear, or anger screams for surrender. It is the ability to act consistently according to your values. You are. Regardless of circumstance, the two are inseparable. Focus is the instrument, self-mastery is the outcome. Focus channels energy. You are, but mastery ensures it is applied strategically. Focus without self-mastery becomes obsessive, rigid, or misdirected. You are. Self-mastery without focus becomes passive or indecisive. Together, they create unstoppable momentum. Consider the way most people operate. They drift through life, allowing fleeting emotions to dictate decisions. Impulses are indulged. Patience is short. Vision is blurred. Opportunities pass unnoticed. Progress stalls. You are. The energy that could have been invested in growth is dispersed in reaction. They mistake activity for achievement, noise for power, and distraction for engagement. You are. Meanwhile, the individual who cultivates focus and mastery moves with precision. They recognize what is essential and eliminate what is not. They harness their energy. You are. Refusing to waste it on anything that does not serve long-term goals. Training focus requires practice, not inspiration. You are. It requires the discipline to return your mind to a task repeatedly despite temptation. It requires resisting instant gratification in favor of delayed reward. You are. Every habit you form, every ritual you maintain, every decision you make to prioritize substance over distraction strengthens the blade. You are. Self-mastery also demands courage. It is easy to surrender to comfort, to fear, to desire. You are. It is far more difficult to remain aligned when circumstances provoke doubt or irritation. Mastery is the silent victory when no one else is watching. You are. When no reward is immediate, you still act according to principle. That is where real character is forged. Life will inevitably throw challenges, tests, you are, and provocations. Without focus, these challenges scatter your energy and weaken resolve. Without self-mastery, they provoke reactions that undermine your goals. You are. With both, adversity becomes opportunity. With both, obstacles sharpen rather than dull your purpose. With both, you are. You operate from a place of internal authority rather than external dependency. The victory of self-mastery is not measured by wealth, recognition, or accolades. You are. It is measured by freedom, the freedom to act intentionally, to choose your path, to remain unshaken by circumstance. It is the freedom to decide your values, you are, your actions, and your focus independent of approval or expectation. That freedom is the ultimate power because it cannot be taken from you. Focus is selective, you are. Self-mastery is sustained. The two together allow you to concentrate on what matters and ignore what does not. They allow you to endure setbacks without collapsing, you are, to remain composed under pressure, and to advance steadily toward objectives that others abandon at the first sign of difficulty. They create resilience, clarity, you are, and precision, the hallmarks of those who succeed where most fail. Every small choice matters. You are. Every moment you redirect attention from distraction to action strengthens the weapon. Every time you resist impulsive desire and act from principle, you are. You win a battle of self-mastery. Each victory compounds, creating momentum. You are. The person who consistently applies focus and discipline accumulates an invisible advantage over time, a reservoir of energy, clarity, you are, and confidence that others cannot replicate. In practical terms, focus eliminates wasted effort. Self-mastery eliminates wasted emotion. Together, you are. They form a feedback loop that amplifies growth. When distractions arise, focus ensures you return to your priorities. When impulses tempt you, you are. Self-mastery ensures you act in alignment with your goals. Over time, this discipline transforms potential into results. Focus is the weapon you are. Self-mastery is the victory. Wield your attention with precision. Govern your mind with discipline. Cultivate habits that sharpen both. Invest energy where it matters. You are. Resist the trivial and transient. Stand unmoved by opinion, indifferent to validation, and composed under pressure. When you do this, you are. You are no longer at the mercy of circumstance. You direct your life instead of being directed by it. You are. You become the architect of your reality rather than a passive participant. You wield a weapon few understand, and you achieve victories most never experience. You are. In this pursuit, power is quiet, authority is internal, and success is inevitable. This is not a philosophy, it is a practice, and mastery in practice, you are, when combined with unwavering focus, is the ultimate expression of strength.